right. I think we're in week 9, if I remember correctly. Week 9. And we are going to start at the tail end of chapter 26. We're out of the law officially now, and we are into the next speech of Moses. So, of course, first thing we always do is consult our handy dandy chart of Deuteronomy just to give ourselves a picture of where we are in the story. We've been in the covenant laws now for several weeks. We are exiting those. And from the past, which is where we started, everything oriented to the generation before, now we're entering into a section of the book, the last half of the book, that is going to be focused on the future. That's not always positive future. It is just future. We are looking out ahead at things that could happen, might happen, warnings about things that if they're not careful will come to pass. And the section we find ourselves in this week is almost the entirety of this second block here, blessings and curses, which is an apt title because, again, you escaped the law only to find yourself in what seems to be an endless description of very visceral curses. And we'll talk about why that is. But I just want to give you some hope. We're almost to the end. There's only 2 more weeks after this. And look at what the title of this last box is. New Hope. This isn't a Star Wars story. This is the end of Deuteronomy. So the last 3 chapters, 31, 32, 33, 34, 4 chapters, because I can't do math, are all about future hope. So that's where we're going. So if you could just hang on for this week, I promise we're going to get somewhere good. The geography of this section is pretty interesting and I think important to just give ourselves a visual of. This place, Shechem, and I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, is a valley in Israel that is pretty important in the biblical story. It's going to come up time and time again as a spot of covenant renewal in the prophets, in the time of the kings, in Joshua or Judges. And it starts right here, right now with this story. The section we're reading today is building toward a moment of covenant renewal. Moses is going to challenge the people to kind of stake their claim in God, sign on the dotted line of the covenant. And this becomes the symbolic place of where that happens, not just here in Deuteronomy, but in future generations as well. And I think Moses does this because it would have been like a visual reminder of the 2 paths set before them. You have 2 mountaintops. And by the way, in the biblical story, we remember what mountains represent, right? It's a high place where you go to meet with God. And so what we're going to find is you can meet with God in one of 2 ways. You can be close and obey God and shema God, and therefore you'll experience a life of blessing. That was representative of Mount Gerizim, which just by geography, where the sun shined, was, you can see it in the picture, very fertile, lots of trees. You can even see houses coming up on this hill, which, by the way, doesn't it make you wonder what you had to do to get a house on the Mount of Blessing? I don't know. I don't know. But you look at over here, there's not as many houses. You have to think there's probably some land value conversations going on there. On the other side here on the right, you have Mount Ebal. This also may sound familiar. We talked about this way back in chapter 3, these 2 mountains. And it's just a visceral, visual reminder of the 2 choices set before Israel. And they're placed on these high mountaintops. And you stand in the valley as a way of saying, make your choice, blessings or curse, life or death, good or evil. And what I like to call in the email, not good, not good. The pattern of what we're going to read today is not accidental. Moses does not decide to spend 53 verses on a bunch of curses because he's just a pessimist or something like that. He does it because this is how covenant treaty documents were written in the ancient Near East. He is using something that they would be intimately familiar with through partnerships that they had with other nations or really just any kind of political treaty that they've come in contact with. And those kinds of documents followed a very similar pattern that we see here in this section of Deuteronomy, and I think in Deuteronomy as a whole. So the first part is what's called a prologue, which is simply a retelling of how these two parties have met. If you think about this as a wedding ceremony, this is like the toast where everybody's describing how great they are, how the couples met, what's gone on with this covenant partnership. And then you sign the marriage treaty and you get all of the things that the legal binding agreements of what you're agreeing to. By the way, what was the first half of Deuteronomy like? It passed summary of all the things that have come before. And then what did we get to? We got to the law, all those chapters about the legal agreement of how these two parties are going to work together. In Deuteronomy, the two parties in question are Israel and God. So it's describing this working relationship. What is life going to be like? This covenant would lay all that out. And then this is surprising to us because we don't necessarily operate in this way. But these ancient communities would have these long sections describing what life was going to be like if they worked together. If think of two nations coming together, hey, if you scratch my back, I'm going to scratch your back. If you come and fight my enemies, I'll come fight your enemies. Oh, and by the way, if I call on you and you don't come to my aid, well, then I'm going to burn your villages down. I mean, this is kind of describing the quid pro quo. That's not the right way to say that. You know what I'm trying to say, of how these two nations are going to work together. And so we shouldn't be surprised that in this section, we're going to get like a curses sandwich with a couple of curses, 12 to be exact. And then we're going to get some blessings describing what's going to go right, and then a whole bunch of curses, what's going to go wrong. And we'll talk about what that looks like when we get to it. And then finally, and I think we'll get to this section next week, there's like a section where who's witnessing the signing of this. And in Deuteronomy, the witness is God. God is witnessing what the people are signing on to and essentially acting like a notary, making this an official document. So that's where we are in just kind of the landscape of this section. Here's where we get started for today. So the end of the law actually really ends just before verse 16 in chapter 26. And this is what it says. The Lord your God commands you this day to follow these decrees and laws, aka everything we've just spent weeks reading about. Carefully observe them with all your heart, with all your soul. What does this language harken back to? It's the Shema. I see a couple of you mouthing it. This is the Shema again. You have declared this day that the Lord is your God, and that you will walk in obedience to him. You will Shema him, that you will keep his decrees, commands, and laws. You will listen to him. You will Shema. You've said this is what you want to do. You've signed on the dotted line, okay? And as a result, the Lord has declared this day you are his people, his treasured possession, as he promised, and that you are to keep his commandments. Do you remember where in the biblical story we've heard this language before? Treasured possession. It's one of our favorite verses.
Like Abrahamic covenant, right?
Yeah, but it's more specific. What book of the Bible? Remember? And you will be for me a treasured possession.
I think that's Genesis, isn't it? I mean, if
Close.
I'm Exodus.
Exodus. That's right. This is Mount Sinai. Look at this language. If you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests. Whenever we read what we're about to read, we have to remember what's at stake. We have to remember the job that Israel has to be a blessing to the rest of the nations. That's what it means for them to be God's treasured possession. They are not being blessed for their own benefit alone. God is not setting them up to flourish and thrive in the land so that things will go well with them. He is blessing them and putting them in the perfect position to be a blessing to the whole world. And when they get that wrong is when we start to see curse after curse after curse come into play. But we'll get there. And then look at this right here. You will be a people holy to the Lord. Do you remember us talking about that? Belonging to Yahweh. In other words, you'll have his name stamped or tattooed on your forehead. Again, this all goes back to what we're just talking about. You represent God in the land. You've agreed to do that, and he's agreed to be with you as you do that. These are the stakes. And so we get to the setting apart of the two choices. And the two choices are two mountains visually that represent blessing and curse, life and death, good and not good. Those are the choices. And I think, we don't like black and white thinking, period. We just don't. But in the biblical story, it often narrows our lives down, sometimes, many cases, to two paths. We see it all the way back in Genesis 3. There will be the seed of the woman and the seed of the snake. In other words, people who sow goodness that humanity was always created to sow, or people that sow snakeness in the world. Two choices, life and death. So here's Mount Ebal, which is the right mountain, right, of cursing. Keep all these commandments I give you today, says Moses. And when you've crossed into the Jordan, he's going to give them this plaster thing that they're supposed to put on this cursed mountain to remind them what he's about to say. So you have the mountain as a reminder, and then you're going to do this ceremony with the plaster and just all these sacrifices. So very clearly, they will have a representation of the curses that are coming. By the way, this very clearly, right? Very clearly, it goes all the way back to Deuteronomy 1. It's the same word, be'er, not beer, be'er, that Moses used to say what he was going to do in this book. Expound very clearly what the law is. It's an expository sermon. So, in other words, what he's doing right now is very clearly going to say what is the law and what happens if you break it. And here's the first section, starting with the top of the curse sandwich. These are the curses on the top of Mount Ebal. When you've crossed the Jordan, the tribes shall stand on Mount Gerizim. That's the blessing. It's going to bless the people. And the Levites, reciting to the people in all a loud voice, cursed are all these things. I think it's 12 total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 12 total curses. Does that make sense? 12 tribes of Israel. Do we think that's an important number? And what's interesting, Elizabeth pointed this out in the email. What do these sound like? Cursed is anyone who dishonors their father and mother, who moves their neighbor's boundary stone, who leads the blind astray, who withholds justice to the father and the widow, who sleeps with his father's wife, who has sexual relations with any animal, who sleeps with, you can kind of just see all of this. Does this not feel like the second half of the Ten Commandments a little bit? This is just spelling out who you are going to be as people. And I'll tell you, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of in Matthew, in the Sermon of the Mount, the Beatitudes. These are like an anti-Beatitudes in my mind, just laying out the immediate terms of the covenant. Cursed is anyone who sleeps with his mother-in-law. Cursed is anyone who kills their neighbor secretly. These are all things that I think all of us would objectively agree are bad things. So let's talk about this word cursed, because I don't know about you, but when I hear the word cursed, it brings up like supernatural, occultic, someone's put a hex on you and you're now cursed. Does anyone is that anyone else's? Am I alone in that? Yeah, that is not at all what the biblical story is talking about when it talks about cursing. From the very beginning, and Elizabeth did such a good job of laying this out in the email. And there's a video on the Bible Project called Blessing and Cursing. In the very beginning, it talks about God's blessing for all people and how it was originally a choice between two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and not good. Does this kind of fit in with what we're talking about? Yeah, life or the tree that leads to death. And humans were given a choice between which tree they would eat. Deuteronomy is setting us up for that exact same choice right now. And what it's saying is not God is going to smite you if you do these things. God is going to put cursing on you. I mean, go back to the fall story. In fact, let's just look at it real quick in Genesis 3. So we have the fall story, all the bad stuff happens. And I want you to pay attention. Who does God curse? Okay. Um, there's one instance of it, but before this, this is Eve and the man giving all their excuses. And so here's the first little thing, consequence the Lord is going to levy down. And who's he talking to? It's the serpent. Cursed are you above all livestock. Does God curse the snake? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, let's go down here. To the woman, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. Painful labor, you will give birth to children. Is the word cursed used here?
No, but it's implied.
No. It's not as clear in the Hebrew or in the English, but the Hebrew here is not necessarily saying God is going to do this. It's just here is what is happening as a result. Because you have done this, you are now entering into a world where your children are going to grow up and it's going to hurt. This childbearing, we tend to think of that as the act of actually giving labor. Like it hurts really bad to give labor. It's talking about raising children. Raising children will be difficult. And then to Adam, what does he say? Here's another word. Cursed is what? Is Adam cursed? No.
No,
What does he curse?
ground.
The ground. God does not curse either of the humans here, even though they have fallen short here in the fall story. God is not cursing human beings because they have done something wrong. What God is saying is you've made a choice to eat from the tree of death, and as a result, you have basically eaten from the cursing. And you've made the choice. I can't help you now. You are going to have to face the consequences of that. I mean, just think about this for a moment. If we had a community of people who dishonored their father and mother, who just stole their neighbor's land, who led blind people astray on purpose, who just didn't care a thing about justice. I mean, you get the picture. What kind of community is that? Is that a life-giving community? Or a community where pain and heartache and difficulty are going to be abundant? I mean, this should make natural sense to us. What God is not saying is, if you break the law, I'm going to come down on you. What God is saying is, I have created the world to operate in such a way, and you have a decision about how you'll play into that, how you'll partner in that. And if you choose to eat from this tree or climb up on this mountain of cursing, then don't be surprised if you get bit by the snake and end up feeling the results of that. And then we're going to get, what are the results of that? That's the question here. What happens if we eat from the tree of life? What happens if we, follow the voice of the snake and eat from the tree of death? Okay. Good news is first, which maybe he should have reversed it. I don't know. But we get the good news first here in chapter 28. We get the blessings. All these blessings will come on you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God, if you eat from the tree of life. You'll be blessed in the city, blessed in the country, aka no matter where you live. The fruit of your womb will be blessed, your crops, your land, your livestock. You're going to have enough bread to eat. You're going to be blessed when you come in, blessed when you go out, no matter where you go. Do you see any commonalities in this? What does all of this have to do with? Anybody want to add anything that you see here?
Just obeying God.
Yeah, but what do all these blessings have in common?
Feels like shalom.
Yeah. Say more about that.
Well, it just seems like, compared to the what you were just talking about earlier about all the chaos in our world, this
Mhm.
it's absent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't this feel like, okay, what was the original Genesis 3 or Genesis 2 even promise that God gave humanity? I'm going to give you a world where you'll flourish and thrive. Go multiply, be a blessing, um, be fruitful and multiply. I mean, the fruit of your womb will be blessed, not just yours, but all the animals around you. You're going to have more food than you know what to do with, no matter where you live, no matter where you go. I mean, this is life in the land back in Eden, back in the garden where everything is working the way it's supposed to. This is life gone right. This is what happens when you eat from the tree. And this is not insert the right coin into the vending machine of God and out pops the right blessing that you need for that day. That's not what God's saying. It's if you obey the Lord, if you follow the law, which we've just spent 3, 4 weeks talking about and seeing that it's not moral code for how to live, but how to create a kind of kingdom where you're uh, doing justice and mercy and taking care of each other. Can we see how this could be true of that kind of community? Okay, look at this. The Lord will grant that enemies who rise up against you will be defeated. The Lord will send a blessing on your barns and everything you put your hand to. Remember that. We're going to see that pop back up. Everything that you do with your hands will be blessed. The Lord will establish you as his holy people as he promised you on oath, if you keep the commandments of the Lord your God and walk in obedience with him. This is like the end of a chiasm from the last time we heard this statement. A people wholly belonging to the Lord, stamped with God's name right on their forehead, living in the kind of community where what happens? All the peoples on earth will see. They'll see you are meant to be that witness and that mission in the world, that you are called by what? The name of the Lord. Again, you bear his name on your forehead. Look at this last one. The Lord will open the heavens, the storehouse of his bounty, to send rain on your land in a season and to bless. I mean, this just sounds like heaven. I love this picture. The Lord will open the heavens to us. Remember, what is the biblical story all about? The reunification of heaven and earth. Look at this. It's like it's happening. If you guys will just obey, then you will be part of bringing heaven and earth back together. Isn't that a beautiful picture? But what's the problem? Can they obey? Oh, no more than we can. And look at verse 14. Do not turn aside from any of the commandments I give you today, to the right or to the left. Okay, how will they turn aside? It's not saying, oh my gosh, follow the moral code. Look at what this comes down to. Following other gods and serving them. How will they turn aside to the right or to the left? By going after other gods. That's the crux of the story. Anytime we put something in God's place that shouldn't be there, anything other than God, it's like saying we are asking for cursing to come upon us. And this is, again, I cannot say this enough tonight. It's not the vending machine of put in the wrong coin, get out the wrong snack. This is about God setting up the world to operate in a certain kind of way. And when we decide that we know better, or we follow other humans who think they know better, or we follow other humans who've set up some arbitrary false God that thinks they know better, then we are just going to end up in the wrong kind of kingdom community. And that is where cursing happens. I want to pause here. How are we feeling so far? Before we get to the real heavy stuff, I want to make sure we have this picture of cursing and blessing down before we go into the cursing section. How are we
Good.
feeling?
Good.
Any thoughts, comments, questions so far?
I just think back to what I grew up. They would always say, "You made your bed, now you're going to lay in it."
Yeah.
That's what this tells me.
Mhm.
Of all the things about he wants them to do, but he gives them a choice. Well, you choose it. You chose that.
Yeah. It's like a parent. Please don't touch the hot stove. Please don't touch the hot stove. How many times can you tell your kid not to do it before you just got to let them find out what happens when they do it? Now, I've not let my child touch a hot stove, but you know what I'm saying. I think we associate God as this dictator who is finger on either trigger. You know what I'm saying? Oh, good. They did good today. They get goodness. Or, oh, she messed up. So, boom, give them a stumbling block. And that's not how God works. God loves us, and his blessings are given freely as a gift to us. But if we live life in a certain kind of way, following other gods, which we've talked about, could mean a whole lot of other things. It's not just about religious gods, but any kind of idol that we cling to, then it is going to lead us into a path of death because our idols can't save us. Only God can do that. And then here in the end of chapter 28, for a long 53 verses, we get a picture of what life on the other side, or the other mountain, so to speak, is going to be like. And this picture is bleak, 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 bleak. But it's going to be told in language that may sound foreign to us, but would have been very familiar to the people who were reading this, especially in later generations, which some people would argue again that Deuteronomy was actually compiled and written after the exile. So if you think about that with this in mind, this whole section becomes alive in a different way. Okay. So think about this. Oh, by the way, I love this quote from Chris Wright. I want to read it too. There is a persistent tendency in human society toward idolatry, seeking answers and solutions in everything but the living God. But these do not give us the salvation they appear to promise. On the contrary, they only lead us deeper into the realms of judgment and curse, in which the frustrations, anger, and despair that run through these verses of Deuteronomy 28 become increasingly real and demoralizing. It just sums it up way better than I could. Okay, so now we enter into the bleak side, a picture of what life will be like should we continue to give in to the temptation to take from the tree of good and not good, of putting ourselves in a position of God to be the ones who define what's right and what's not right, to live by our own wisdom. You'll be cursed in the city, cursed in the country. Your basket and your kneading trough will be cursed. The fruit of your womb will be cursed. You will be cursed when you come in and cursed when you go out. Does this language sound familiar? We just read it. It's exactly the same. It is the anti of this blessing in short form. In other words, again, if we choose to live apart from God, don't be surprised when all of the blessings that God has promised his people don't apply anymore. Does that make sense? Eat from the tree of life, experience life. Eat from the tree of death, you're going to experience death. The Lord will send on you curses, confusion, and rebuke in what? Everything you put your hand to. Now, is this going to be a big theme in the Gospels? This is like center stage debate when we talk about the temple, especially in John, in Acts. This was something that got Stephen stoned, first Christian martyr, because what did he say about the temple? The temple built by your hands. It all comes back down to this. We all create with our hands. It's what we were made to do. God wants us to bring out the potential of the earth, but we are, regardless, we're going to work with our hands. We're going to create, we're going to do just like we were made to. But we're either going to create with God behind us, with following his rules, following his wisdom, living with him as our guidepost. And if we do that, what did it say earlier? Well, the things of our hands, everything we put our hands to will be blessed. If we try and go about this world on our own steam, right? If we try and be the ones who are dreaming up all these plans and creating all these things on our own without God, everything we put our hand to will be cursed. I don't know about you, but this is a sobering reminder to think about how everything I do in my work, at home, everything I create, am I creating from what I think is the best or on my own wisdom and steam? Or am I actually listening for the voice of God? Am I following, as Matt would say, in the tailwind of the Spirit? I just think this is an important reminder for us today. Look down here at verse 25. The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. 27. The Lord will afflict you with the boils of Egypt and with tumors, festering sores, and the itch from which you cannot be cured. At midday, you will grope around in the dark with no one to rescue you. Does this language strike anyone as familiar? Harken back to any story we've read before. Boils, curses, the
Curses on
light
Egypt.
being shut out. What is it?
Curses on Egypt.
That's right. When God rescued his people from Egypt, what did he do to the Egyptians? The plagues.
Yeah.
You can't say that God's not fair. He's saying, if you don't listen to me, it's going to go for you exactly how it went with the Egyptians. Only you will have no one to rescue you when that happens. Isn't that a pretty stark message? I mean, you're talking to people who their parents went through that, were the ones rescued from Egypt. And God is saying, look, be careful, or that could be you who turns into those Egyptians. I mean, here's just, I think, the worst section. Joni, this is, I think, what you were talking about. You'll be pledged to be married to a woman, but she'll be taken and assaulted. You'll build a house, but not live in it. Plant a vineyard, but not even begin to enjoy its fruit. Your ox will be slaughtered. Do you remember last week when we talked about the military conquest? And Moses is saying, like, if you have built a house but haven't yet enjoyed it, you can go. You're exempt. If you've planted a vineyard but haven't gotten to enjoy it, you go home too. You've been married but not gotten to enjoy your wife. Remember what we said about that? It's all ways that God wanted his people to experience life in the land. So conversely, what is this? If they don't obey God, they will experience the opposite of life in the land. Do you see it again? Deuteronomy throughout this whole book is painting a picture of two different lifestyles, two different choices, two different paths that people can go down. And it doesn't shy away from saying how hard that life will be if they do not obey. Your sons,
Well,
oh, go ahead.
Alex, I meant to jump in and just say, can't we imagine what it would be like if we were living in this type of a lawless society?
Yeah.
I mean, we think the old West was bad when they had the gunslingers, so forth, and all that. Think what it would be like today with it if we lived in a society where someone took what was yours
Yeah.
without any repercussion.
I mean, the closest I can think of is look at Russia and Ukraine, where
Well, I
one
mean,
day Russia just comes in and takes
well,
what is theirs.
Look at what's going on in so many countries in South Africa. I mean, in Africa,
Yep.
it's just wholesale slaughter. Um, so I mean, that's what he's talking about. If we don't choose God and choose idols, this is what eventually happens because there's no laws for us to be governed by.
And by the way, does this happen to Israel?
Yeah.
Spoiler alert for the rest of the biblical story, if you don't know this already. Um, Israel is going to be carted away into a foreign land when Babylon comes in. Why? Because the rest of the story between now and the exile, picking it up from Joshua and Judges all the way to the prophets, is one bad story after another of every single way that Israel could fail and go against exactly what they just agreed to do. I mean, you have like some bright, shiny moments in there, some prophets that did really well, some judges who, rallied the troops, kings who at Sketchem committed to the covenant all over again. But ultimately, it's a downward spiral from here to the point where all of these things end up coming true. Um, Look at this right here in 36. The Lord will drive you, and the king you set over you. Is that a knock? You're not supposed to have a king other than God, but you're gonna ask for a king. And by the way, that king is going to lead you to a nation unknown to you or your ancestors. There you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone. You will become a thing of horror, a byword and an object of ridicule among the people where the Lord will drive you. What story is that? Daniel. It's Daniel. I mean, this is what's going to happen to Israel. They're going to be driven into a foreign nation where other gods reign supreme. It's almost as if God is saying, okay, you don't want me to be your God? Then go see what life is like under a different God. We've talked about this, particularly in the gospel stories. It is not God saying, finger on the trigger, you deserve cursing, so bomb, nuclear option here. What it's more like is God saying, you don't want my protection? You don't want me on your side? That's okay. See what happens as a result. It is God taking his hands and saying, so be it. Because God is going to honor our choice every single time.
Isn't that somewhat the way that we as parents do our children?
Yeah, I think you have to at some point.
You have to give them a little rope and a little more rope and a little more rope. And you say, okay, hey,
And does it mean that you love them any less?
no, no.
No, not at all. And what we see in the biblical story, we see it in, let's look at it because surprisingly, we have time tonight. This is the other passage we were reading today or this week, Ezekiel 36. And what does this passage tell us about God's heart for his people?
Restoration.
For I will take you out of the nations, I will gather you from all the countries and bring you back to your land. I will sprinkle clean water on you, aka I will purify you. I will cleanse you from all your impurities and from what? All your idols. The thing that got you here in the first place. And here's that magic. I mean, if there's a verse you ever highlight in your Bible and keep coming back to, this is it. I will give you a new heart and a new spirit. This is the new covenant promise. Moses knew, we're going to see this next week. Moses knew that they weren't going to be faithful. He's warning them for a reason because he spent a lot of time with them and he kind of has gotten to know them by now. He knows that they're going to mess this up. And so he's saying, by the way, there is hope. We'll see how Moses captures that hope next week and the week after. But Ezekiel, the prophet, generations later, have the same hope for a new heart, something that happens on the inside of us, and a new spirit that is going to help us to be faithful. But way back here, I mean, just bad news bears. I mean, look right here. The Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth. And I know it's hard to read these stories, especially where it gets into siege talk right here
Look
in
at number 53.
yeah, because of the suffering that your enemy will inflict on you during the siege, you will eat the fruit of your womb, of the womb, the flesh of the sons and daughters the Lord has given you. Okay, what's going on here? Well, wouldn't you know, in the story of the exile, if you go and read it, or just even read about Babylonian siege um, practices, what do they do with children? I mean, they're going to take every adult and cart them into exile, right? They're going to make them slaves, try to convert them into Babylonians and assimilate them into their workforce. But what do you do with babies? You can't handle mouths to feed like that. They toss them over the wall.
Are they killing and eating them?
I don't know about eating them. I think the eating is probably more of a metaphor because again, eat the fruit of the womb. My guess is that's a metaphor. I don't know that they were cannibals, but I do know that they did not let babies live. If you were a conquering army, you could do something with the men you left alive, and you can unfortunately do something with the women. You had no use for babies. And so, what we are seeing here is a reality of war that is completely foreign to us, but was very common practice in the ancient world. Very common of the Babylonians, probably pretty common of the Canaanites, who were child sacrifice societies. I mean, this is just a dose of reality for what siege is going to be like if you are not under God's protection. And it's not fun for us to read, but for the people who originally read this, it would have been real to them in a way it just can't be real to us because again, like last week I said, we've never experienced this kind of warfare, of this kind of brutality in our country, or at least the vast majority of us have not. I'm going to skip down to this last few paragraphs here. But well, first, questions, comments, thoughts. I don't want to brush over this too quickly.
I have a question about the
Yeah.
theology. It goes to blessings and curses, and it talks a lot about health. And back then I could see where they would think that all of your health is because of that, but in contextual of today, um, it's not really it may be your genetics, but I don't know about
Yeah.
what I mean.
I think that they would definitely attribute everything, health, rain, snow. I don't think they had snow, but you know what I'm saying. Weather, natural disasters, health, being able to have a child, not have a child, all of that would have been attributed to a God. Now, we know better. That doesn't make us smarter. We know how the world works a little differently. But what we all would agree on, just perhaps in different ways it works itself out, is that everything is a gift from God. Everything is a gift from God. We just don't believe we have to work to earn the rain. We believe that God's just blessing us and has created a world where it works. Does that make sense? I know that's an unsatisfactory answer.
No, that was good. That helped.
Okay. Um,
Alex, makes me think of Job in regards to the counsel that he keeps getting from his friends. They're all saying that you've sinned and you're being cursed, basically.
yeah.
And that in the end does not end up being the message from
Yeah.
God.
What does God say? Are you the one who set the universe to work? Do you understand how this all works? AKA, I'm God, you're not. Don't pretend that you can boil it all down to, again, the vending machine. Insert good, get good. Insert bad, get bad. The reality of this is that all of us make choices every single day in both categories. Little good choices, little bad choices, big good choices, big bad choices. And so it's not this, oh my gosh, we're operating in good all the time, 100%. So we get blessing upon blessing upon blessing. All of us make choices in both camps every single day. And you compound that by millions of people, and what do we get? We get a mixed bag world where the ripple effects of other people's bad decisions hit me, and the ripple effects of my bad decisions hit some of you, and it just goes around in this ripple effect circle. That's why I think we have a world now that is ultimately, in a lot of ways, chaotic, and yet God calls us to choose goodness in the midst of it, to be people who are sending out counter ripples, basically, to counteract the bad in the world. And we hope by doing that, we're bringing more of heaven to earth until the day when God comes to ultimately restore the two. Look at verse 62 here. You who were as numerous as the stars in the sky will be left but few. Can you think of any statement that shows the reverse of the creation blessing more than this? What we are witnessing in these curses is subsequently acts of decreation of how the world was supposed to work, a descent into disorder and chaos. And I'm a firm believer where there is chaos, it's further from God. God wants to bring order and peace and blessing and flourishing. That's just my personal opinion. And we see that here in Deuteronomy, where it's just a descent into chaos and darkness and just a downward spiral that gets worse and worse and worse the more people choose to eat from the wrong tree. Then the Lord will scatter you, again, talking about the exile among nations from one end of the earth to the other. We call this the diaspora later on in future generations, where Jews were sent all over the world. There you will worship other gods. And then finally, look at this. Again, the ultimate just de-telling of the story of God. The Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey I said you should never make again. God brings the people out of Egypt with the hope of creating this nation that's blessed to be a blessing, to be missionaries to the world. All they have to do is make the right choice to eat from the right tree and to submit and follow God's way of living. And yet they don't do it. And God says, it's like I am sending you back to Egypt. If you can't obey, if you won't accept it, you're going back to the place I hoped you would never go. This is a tragedy, a tragedy. And it's people's own reaping the consequences of their own rebellious desires and disordered desires. Luckily, this is not where the story ends. We get one more chapter today in this week's reading. And this is like a positive chapter. It's like dose of reality, dose of reality. Which hill are you going to choose? And then Moses summons them all and says, you've seen all the things that God can do for you, the ways that he provides for you, the way that he clothes you, that you are kept safe from all of your enemies. So how do you respond to that? Follow the terms of this covenant so that you may prosper in everything that you do. All of you are standing today in the presence of the Lord your God. And then he lists all the kinds of people. The Hebrew underneath this phrase, all of you are standing today, is more like a way of saying, you have taken your stand. You have you've put your stake in the ground for how you're going to live and what you're going to do. You are standing here in order to enter a covenant with the Lord your God, a covenant the Lord is making with you this day and sealing with an oath to confirm you this day as his people. You belong to God and God belongs to you, just as it was promised way back in the days of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is the hope. This is what God is begging them to do. Choose life. And Moses will make it more explicit in the chapters to come, putting this choice before them. In this chapter, he's saying, renew this covenant, stake your claim, make a decision to follow God, even if you don't get it right or all the time, continue following him. And I'm struck this week by this prayer I found from a Methodist pastor, Randy Allen. And I think, we don't follow the same law, but we are also asked to stake our claim in the ground. And so, what I want to do is just give a moment of silence, and then we're going to read this prayer as a way of just just putting our stake in the ground. So, if that's what you want to do today, if you want to, we're all standing in front of those two mountains trying to decide which one we're going to go after. And I think this prayer has reminded me what it looks like to go after life. So, I'm going to leave a beat of silence. We're going to pray this, and then we'll come back together and we'll close it out for tonight. Sound good? Okay, well, y'all pray with me here. Father, I bow before you, praising your holy name. I come to you with nothing except the blessings you have given me. Please forgive me. I have turned my love toward the world. I have yielded to temptation. I have worshiped idols. I freely, voluntarily, and fully renounce all idols, cancel every invitation to evil, close the door to evil, and reject sinful influences in my life. Father, I turn back to you completely. Before heaven and earth, I renew my commitment to you as my God and to Jesus Christ as my Lord, my Savior, and the way. And I invite the Holy Spirit to dwell within me more fully than ever before. Father, you are the holy, pure, divine creator. You are merciful and just. You are love. I offer myself as a holy, living sacrifice to you. I surrender myself to you. I am no longer my own. I renounce my own worthiness, wisdom, and will. I place myself completely in your hands. I freely and with a willing heart give all of myself, spirit, soul, and body, to you for your pleasure and disposal. I ask to be your servant. I promise to follow your lead. Put me to doing, put me to suffering. Let me be employed for you or laid aside for you. Let me be full. Let me be empty. Let me have all things. Let me have nothing. Lord, I am your empty vessel. Make me as you will. Thank you for your life and your light and your love. And all God's people said, Amen.
And
All right. Thoughts, questions, comments in our last few moments together tonight. How we doing?
please send us that, Alex.
Yeah, I can put it. It's in the email for this week, but I'll put it here in the chat if I figure out
Okay.
how to
All
do
right.
that.
Sorry. I haven't
Right.
gotten there yet.
No.
Okay.
I will say the last day that you did for this week's reading, for me, it resurrected the whole study.
Oh,
It was,
resurrected it from.
yeah, it was just so good. I mean, because we've been through a lot of drudgery.
Yeah, that's one word for it.
That's okay. We have that in life.
But my hope is that even as we've gone through these laws and they're hard and confusing, that in the midst of them, you've gotten some glimpses of who God is. I mean,
Oh, of course.
someone who cares about the least, the lost, the widow, the orphan. I think we see that in the law for sure.
Oh, I've seen hope in all of it,
Mm,
but it was just a little bit difficult to study.
yeah, for sure.
That's all I was saying.
Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Thoughts, questions, comments from today? All right. Going twice. Okay, my friends, may you choose life, 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 life. And just know in the moments where we all make mistakes and choose death, that there is always a return and a call back from God saying, come on home. It's all right. You can come back. I'll make you new all over again. And so may God bless you. We'll see you back next week. Only two more left. You're almost there. Bye.
Thanks,
you.
Alice.